All right. So, welcome to lecture 2. In the first class, we talked about a little bit about categorization, and now we are going to trickle it down a little bit more for you as the future superstar educator, especially with little ones, that you are all going to be. So, let's first process this and understand, a scenario that you might have or experience. So, imagine that there's a little 3-year-old that you're working with that's going to point to a picture of a tiger, and they're going to say, kitty. So what just happened in that little one's brain? So what they're doing is they're usually using categorization. So this is going to be one of the most basic cognitive processes that your child or a child that you're working with is going to be using every day. And as an early childhood educator, this is going to be key for you to understand it and make it work to your advantage and set those little ones up for success. So one of the first things to recognize is that by nature, children categorize. Humans in general are going to categorize everything in the world into categories. They're going to help with our predictions and our generalizations, and it's going to help us learn through experience and feedback. So for young children, they are constantly categorizing. They're categorizing animals into dog, cat, bird, fish, different foods, fruit, vegetables, snacks, meals, toys, dolls, blocks, cars, puzzles, emotions, colors. All of these are categorized. And it's a constant process within those teeny brains that they have, okay? So what is your role as the educator? First, you're going to learn to recognize when children are learning categories. You're going to provide so many examples and counterexamples to help them with this categorization. You are going to correct any misconceptions that they have in a very gentle manner. You're going to scaffold from concrete to abstract categories. And your job is to support them like anything else through each of these developmental phases. So we already talked about the prototype theory, where we form a mental image that is the typical or the average one. So a prototypical bird is going to have wings, feathers, a beak. They're going to fly. They're going to sing, typically medium-sized, and they perch up in that tree, right? So when a child says, that's not a bird, when they see a penguin or an ostrich, that's going to be something that as an educator, this is where you come in. This is where you're going to thrive. So you point out, you say, hey, this penguin is a bird. And the child's like, nah, birds can fly. So what's happening in that child's brain? So they formed a bird prototype, right? Theirs looks like a robin or a sparrow, and this includes that birds can fly. And somehow penguins don't match this, therefore it's rejected in their brain to fit that categorization. So what do you have to do? There's a couple different strategies that you can use to approach this. You're going to start with the prototypical examples, right? So let's go to dogs. You're going to start with typical dogs. Probably our golden retriever, right? They're going to be medium-sized. They're going to be barking. They're going to have 4 legs, and they're going to be furry. Then what you should do is introduce some of those that maybe aren't the prototypical. Bring in Chihuahua or a Great Dane or a hairless breed, right? These are then going to show them that there are items that are outside those categories. The same thing with fruit. You could start with the apples and the bananas and the oranges, and then introduce tomatoes and avocados that are going to be less prototypical. Another strategy is to explicitly expand these categories. So you could say something like, you're right that most birds fly, and you know lots of flying birds like robins or blue jays, but penguins are also birds. So have a conversation about what makes a bird. Does it have feathers? Check. Penguins have feathers. Does it have wings? Check. Penguins have wings. Does it lay eggs? Yep. Penguins lay eggs. Does it have a beak? Penguins have a beak. So penguins are just birds that happen to swim rather than fly. So that makes them kind of interesting. So this way, you're teaching that categories have defining features, like the feathers and the beaks and the eggs, but not all features are required. Flying is typical, but not a defining tool. So this way, they understand that these category boundaries are a little bit more flexible than we might think. Another strategy is to use these varied examples right from the start. So if you're teaching homes, you're going to teach about houses, about apartments, about mobile homes, about boats, about shelters, okay? And that there's different cultures and different climates and different materials. So this will, right from the get, prevent that rigid stereotyping. So another key connection that you want to make is the feature-based categorization. So what makes a dog a dog? So often we categorize based on features, their attributes, their characteristics. And some features are going to end up being more important than other ones. And the children are going to have to learn which features matter the most. So there's some learning errors that children are often going to experience. So a common one is going to be overgeneralization or an overextension. Calling all four-legged animals doggy, calling all men that they see dad, and calling all round objects ball. So what happened is the child only learned one feature, 4 legs, male, round, and then uses that to categorize everything else they see. There's also a chance that they can undergeneralize, that they call the family's golden retriever dog, and that is the only dog. Or that circles are only circle if they're perfectly round, and this excludes ovals, right? So what's happening? The child's categorization is too narrow with too specific of examples. So a couple strategies to combat this. Explicitly teach diagnostic features. So let's say we're talking about a triangle. We're not just going to show something like this, right? Because that's going to make it very, very specific. So instead, we should show one on its side, one that is not an equilateral, maybe a unilateral, and give that the important components of a triangle is that they have 3 sides and 3 corners, and they can point in any direction, be different sizes. Another strategy with corrective feedback and explanation. If there's a cow meandering, cows meander, yeah, and a little kiddo points at it and says, doggy. So what's happened here? You know, they see 4 legs and they are trying to put that into the category. So what you can do is, just be like, nope, not a dog. Not helpful, right? That is not helpful for their categorization. Instead, you could say, I can see why you thought that. It has 4 legs just like a dog. But look, it's much bigger. It has horns and it has spots. This is a cow, and cows go moo and give us milk. Dogs say woof. Okay, so this is a way to expand their categorization. So now you're teaching which features matter, the size, the horns, the sounds, and you're acknowledging the correct features, or the shared features, the 4 legs, and now you're providing a new category label. You can do this in class, comparing a dog and a cat. Make a little chart. What do they have the same? What do they have different? Same, they have 4 legs. They're furry. They have tails. They can be pets. Different. Dogs bark, cats meow. Dogs' tail wags when they're happy and cats purr. Cats climb trees easily. Dogs don't. Dogs are loving. Cats make you work for it. They probably won't know that one, but it's still true. All right, so another key connection is that hierarchical categories are going to come into play. So we have 3 of them. We have basic, superordinate, and subordinate, right? So these are the 3 levels. So it goes on the very abstract level is superordinate. So this would be animal, furniture, vehicle, musical instrument, the most general of categories. And then we have basic. This is the most natural. We have dog, we have chair, we have car, we have drum. And then we have the subordinate. This is very specific. We have golden retriever, we have a rocking chair, we have an SUV, we have a bass drum. So research has shown is that children first learn at the basic level, that dog, chair, car, and then expand up or down as they mature. So developmental progression is usually ages 2 to 3. They're going to be learning very basic level categories. That dog, the cat, the shoe. Age 3 and 4, this is when they're going to start with the subordinate categories and the distinctions. Different types of dogs. Big dog, small dog, puppy dog. Different kind of vehicles. Car, truck, bus. Ages 4 to 5, now they're going to learn the subordinate, superordinate, subordinate, categories. Animals include dogs, cats, birds, and fish. Food includes fruits, vegetables, snacks. Once they hit 5 or 6, this is when they're going to start building those complex hierarchies. They're going to understand that it goes animal, mammal, dog, beagle, and they can really grasp the multiple classifications. So what should you do for this? Strategy 1, you're going to start at the basic level when introducing new concepts. Start with, this is a dog. Don't say, this is a mammal, too abstract, or this is a Labrador Retriever, that's going to be too specific for them. After they master that, then you're going to go, some dogs are big and some dogs are small. Dogs are a typical type of animal like a cat and a dog. Strategy 2, you're going to build upward and downward gradually. You're going to progress through different weeks, basic levels, learn those basic things along with pictures, sounds, and characteristics. Week 3, introduce that subordinate one. These are different kinds of dogs, puppies or baby dogs. Some dogs are big, some dogs are small. Then you're going to go subordinate. All of these are dogs, cats, birds, fish are animals. And then by week 5, there should be hierarchical understanding. Maybe you can create a chart. Maybe we could do a sorting game, something like that. So the next big connection is the idea of the exemplar versus the prototype, how children are going to store this knowledge. We talked about prototype in class the other day. This is the average or the typical member. Exemplar is how we're going to store those examples and compare them based on that. When we work with children, they're likely going to use both strategies. So in an example, child A, who might be a prototype learner, they're going to quickly generalize from a few examples. They're going to form abstract typical dog images. They're going to be good at categorizing new examples, but they may overgeneralize. All four-legged animals are dogs. Child B, the exemplar learner, they're going to need specific examples in many of them. They're going to compare the new dog to the remembered dogs. So they're going to be slower to generalize, but they're going to be more accurate. But they may undergeneralize. My dog is the only dog. Okay, so what should we do as educators? Typical strategy is to provide both the prototypical and the exemplar approach. Start with the prototypical chair, right? 4 legs, backrest, seat, right size for sitting, made out of plastic, maybe wood. Okay, and then provide some diverse examples. A stool, it doesn't have a back. Beanbag chair, there's no legs. Rocking chair, it has a completely different structure. High chair for babies or a wheelchair, right? This is going to support both learning styles. Another strategy is the explicit comparison to known examples. So point to something and say, is this a chair? Let's talk about the chairs that we know. Classroom chairs have 4 legs and a back. Reading corner has a beanbag chair. Your kitchen might have stools. This one has 3 legs and a back, and it's different from our classroom chairs, but we can sit on it. So yes, it's a type of chair. So with this, you are activating these stored exemplars, you're teaching a comparison process, and you're expanding on the category boundaries. So another key connection is the transfer and generalization. So this is the goal of category learning, applying the learned category knowledge to new situations. So this can be recognition of new category members, predictions about unfamiliar items, and flexible thinking. So how do we do this? What are some strategies? First, you're going to test transfer with some novel examples. So after teaching fruit, right? We learned about apples and bananas and oranges, but here's a kiwi. Have you seen this before? Do you think this is a fruit? Why or why not? So this will allow children to show that their surface features, they've memorized specific fruits, or if they know deeper features, that it's sweet, it has seeds, it grows on plants, eaten as food. Another strategy is to practice in multiple contexts. Teach sharing. Practice sharing toys at playtime, sharing snacks, books, space, home with siblings. All right? This is going to really expand those boundaries of categories that they have. And you definitely want to encourage your students to make predictions. We've learned about dogs and cats. Today we're going to learn about rabbits. Before I tell you about rabbits, what do you think? Do rabbits have fur like dogs and cats? Do they have 4 legs? What do you predict? So this is going to activate category knowledge, comparison thinking, and generalizable skills. Some things to avoid, some pitfalls. Teaching only prototypes, because that's going to be only showing typical examples and with very rigid categories. Or not explaining diagnostic features, assuming children will figure out the features and then children will focus on irrelevant features. So showing triangles that are all blue and small, things like that. Correcting without explanation, simply saying, no, that's wrong. Children then don't learn why they're wrong, and they don't learn how to correct the features. And finally, introducing abstract categories too early. So teaching animals before the students know about specific animals, teaching shapes before they know circles, squares, and triangles. So remember, concrete basic level first, then superordinate, and then the complex hierarchies. Okay? So that is how you teach complex thinking to the little ones. Enjoy your day.